Teddy Roosevelt said that the Maneaters of Tsavo was the most remarkable account of any that we have on record. But that doesn't really answer the basic question, which is, why were the Maneaters of Tsavo eating people?
Now, as much as the Brits were completely full of themselves with the idea of saving Africa from the Africans, there was truth to what they were saying about their attempts to end slavery. Tsavo was routinely crossed by Arab slaver caravans on their way to the slave markets in Mombasa. In fact, it may be because of these caravans why these man-eating lions ever became such a problem. The appalling conditions of the long, arduous journey to Mombasa would have resulted in a number of sick slaves. The Arab slavers would then just toss the dead and dying into the African bush, making easy prey for the lions. These caravans went on uninterrupted for centuries, and it's quite possible that the Tsavo lions had gotten used to the taste of human flesh. So when the British finally put an end to the African slave trade, the Arab slavers may have left, but the lions certainly didn't, and the very bridge Patterson was tasked to build was right on the foundations of the Tsavo lions' hunting grounds. Another reason why so many of the construction crew were killed by these lions was due to their country of origin. Since many of the African natives refused to work on building this bridge, the British resorted to importing thousands of Indians instead. Unlike the African locals who were used to the wildlife in Tsavo, these poor men knew little to nothing about how to protect themselves. They were probably more focused on just doing their jobs and not in their worst nightmares would they have considered that they were being watched. There was also the issue of just how many of them there were. Up to several thousand men were scattered all along the railroad for up to 30 miles. These small pockets of campsites were extremely isolated, exposed, and vulnerable out in the open. So when the lion attacks began, they had absolutely no protection. Now, although the lives of the construction crew was indeed Patterson's responsibility, the fact of the matter was that he was just simply not an experienced hunter. What would often happen is that he would spend the night in a tree close to where a lion attack had originally taken place. He would then wake up and find out the next morning that the lions had attacked in a completely different part of the camp.
2 are dead now in 2 nights.
A second.
Far end of the camp. A man wandering alone at night. There's even less of him than there was of Mahina.
What made matters even worse was just the lack of firearms that were available. Out of thousands of workers sprawled out for miles building this bloody bridge and railway, there were very few guns between them, and the guys who had guns would be running around like crazy trying to get to wherever the next lion attack was, and by the time they got there, it was usually too late. So the next solution in trying to defend themselves was to build these really sharp thorn bush fences around their camps called bomas. Now, bomas generally do tend to work in keeping lions out in other parts of Africa, but these lions would almost magically appear and disappear as if the bomas weren't even there at all. This is the moment when some of the locals stopped even seeing them as lions, but as supernatural predators.
As good a movie as The Ghost in the Darkness is, in terms of its historical account, it does have one major flaw.
I think that the biggest historical inaccuracy are with the lions themselves. Now, you think that wouldn't be the case, since the movie consistently points out that there is something very special about these lions, something that sets them apart from all others.
There's a legend here. 2 man-eaters are making all the trouble.
Oh, this is Africa, Patterson. I thought you were a hunter.
It's not that simple. These lions are not like lions.
But apparently, this is only just referring to their savagery and being extremely intelligent. And whilst, yes, this is all absolutely true, the filmmakers also decided to exclude one very important detail. Lions from Tsavo are actually maneless. Now, you might be wondering why on earth am I being so picky over such a seemingly small detail? Well, the truth of the matter is that might actually have a lot to do with exactly why these lions were so effective in killing people. Although scientists still don't know exactly why Tsavo male lions are maneless, there are a couple of theories that do help explain. One being that manes tend to be impractical in this part of Africa and get in the way of their hunting due to the local vegetation, and that by being thorny bushes. Starts to make sense exactly how those lions were able to get past those impregnable bomas, since more than likely they were able just to squeeze right through them. Another theory being that Tsavo male lions have higher levels of testosterone that reduces their chances in having mates. That in turn would also explain why they are so formidably dangerous and aggressive. Tsavo male lions are also known to be much larger than other males. When Patterson finally shot the real lions, they were measured to be 9 feet in length.
Now, when we think of male lions, we usually think of lions that look more like this, full manes. And if you want to see male lions that have full manes, you want to go to someplace where it's cold, like the Atlas Mountains of Morocco or the highlands of Ethiopia or even Cape Town, South Africa. Where it's warmer, they tend to have less manes. Also, in zoos, you can take your zoo lion and you can actually get rid of the mane by giving it a sufficient amount of testosterone. It's kind of like male pattern baldness. And one other thing that was just mentioned is that these lions at Tsavo also tend to be quite large. Well, in the Pleistocene, in the Ice Age, we have many drawings on caves of lions, and none of them have manes. And so the theory is that the Pleistocene male lions did not have manes, and they were probably much larger than today's lion. Perhaps they had more testosterone. Now, there is an old theory that calls such lions buffalo lions, lions that are large, maneless, high testosterone, that tend to hunt buffalo.
Now that I have established exactly why having these lions be maneless is such an important detail, the next obvious question is, why did the filmmakers feel the need to ditch it? Well, to be honest, I don't know exactly why they did. I mean, like, maybe because manes just look so awesome on a lion, and having them doesn't really take too much away from the movie. Or quite possibly, it was much more practical to find and train a common mane lion. I mean, to be honest, I think this is nerve-wracking enough, rather than finding the courage to work with the infamous Tsavo lions.
In the movie The Ghost in the Darkness, the movie company actually used a number of different lions, but two of the main lions were Caesar and Bongo. And Caesar and Bongo both came from Canada, and they were movie lions. They appeared in lots of Hollywood movies. For example, those are the lions that you see in George of the Jungle. One of the most persistent reasons for why man-eaters become man-eaters is usually because they have trouble catching their prey. In 1898, there was a rinderpest outbreak, and that not only decreased the amount of cattle in this area, it decreased the amount of wildlife as well. And that could be one of the reasons why they turned to man-eating. Another possible reason is that they might have had dental problems. In fact, that's fairly common. The lion that is the man-eater of Mfuwe had dental problems, and so did both of the lions in The Ghost in the Darkness. In fact, one of them had quite severe dental problems. Now take a look at the lion's skull in front, and you'll see in the lower jaw there's a great deal of damage. Now, Patterson said that he had done that with his .303 rifle. However, modern analysis by dental experts say that that abscess had been there for a very long time, and Patterson couldn't possibly have caused that damage. This damage is sufficient that it could have impeded the lion's hunting capability. So anyway, this means that my next objective in Tsavo is to find a large maneless male lion. This proves to be more difficult than you'd think. And finally, we did get a message that someone at a lodge called Tsavo might have seen what we were looking for, so we went over there. Remember these two bridges going to Tsavo because we're coming back to them. When we do reach Tsavo, we discover that in fact male lions have been seen. There's a trio of brothers not too far away, and so we take off from Tsavo and we go looking for them, but we don't get very far. No, indeed, pretty quickly we discover we have a flat tire on the right rear, and we replace that tire, but we've only got one spare, and that means that right now we don't have a good spare tire. Then after we've replaced this tire, we walk around to the other side, and the left rear tire is also flat. Now, what we suspect happened was that when we drove over those bridges and then drove back over, there must have been something protruding up on them that punctured first one tire and then the other. Now, the left rear tire has got a pretty slow leak on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pump it up and go back to Tsavo. We're getting those tires repaired, a patch on one and a patch and a tube on the other, and the reason why we don't put tubes in both of them is because there was only one tube. When we get the tires repaired, we put the best repaired tire on the left rear. This is the tire that has the tube in it, and the one that's just been patched that we couldn't put a tube on, well, that becomes the spare, and we head out, and pretty quickly we discover some evidence of a kill. Apparently a lion has killed something, and the vultures are cleaning up right now. So we're looking around for lions and watching the vultures at pretty much the same time. Of course, eventually the vultures do get their fill, and the result of that is that a jackal comes in and he fills his tummy. The lions have clearly left this particular kill site, but since we're near a water hole, it's unlikely that they went far. They're someplace in the shade, and they'll come back for water at a later time and perhaps another kill at a later time, but right now it's shade they're looking for, and in fact that's where we find them. There's three brothers here. Now one has what passes for a full name for Tsavo. One has a very skimpy mane, and one has no mane at all. Now they're quite a distance away. I can conveniently see, and so we're not going to get a really good view of them. Now, these three males are known as the Tsavo Four. The reason that they're four instead of three is that one of the lions is missing. Actually, it's a lioness. She's out giving birth to cubs someplace. But she's the only female in this three male pride. Now, these specific lions are referred to as buffalo lions. They are, in fact, specialists in large prey like Cape buffalo or elephant or hippopotamus or something like that. In this particular case, they tend to go after Cape buffalo and baby elephants. So that's the sort of lions that they are. They are probably full of testosterone, which is why the manes are so skimpy, and they're quite large, and they're quite able to take on large prey. I can only see the one that seems to have a mane now.
And then just, if you look at his bottom,
Yeah, the brother,
other one's
the face
facing
is
out.
there, yeah.
okay, and the third brother's just gone and sat, these just
Oh,
lie down in the
yeah, I see him. I see his shadow, his silhouette.
So when we first saw him, we didn't realize whether they'd killed something because it was dark or whether he was just lying in the shade.
Well, we're not quite at the end of the story, even though we have found the large maneless lion. And the reason is because on our way back, we took a side road, one that's not frequently traveled, and headed back towards our lodge. And as we did, we got our third flat tire of the day. The tire that had a tube and had been patched went down and shredded. Absolutely, it's the one in the center. We didn't have but that one patched spare on the back, but that was enough to get us back to the lodge.
Now, because Patterson's story is so incredible, there are many skeptics out there in the academic community who just find it all hard to believe, and you know what? I can't exactly blame them. I mean, there are so many things that Patterson reported seeing in his book, The Maneaters of Tsavo, that read like fantastic fiction. One event that stands out from any other actually took place after Patterson had killed the lions. Whilst Patterson was hunting in the African bush, he came across a cave and was compelled to go in. Upon entering the cave, he made a horrifying discovery.
Holy Christ. Lions don't do this. Lions never had a lair like this. They're doing it for the pleasure.
It sounds like it's totally made up, and for the longest time, that's exactly what people thought Patterson did. That he embellished on the story a little bit to spice things up. The only proof he had was a picture he had taken of the cave entrance. The whereabouts of this cave became a total mystery until it was rediscovered in 1997. However, scientists were unable to find the piles of human bones Patterson described, allowing some historians to even question how much of his story with the lions was even true, that the 135 victims Patterson claimed had been killed by the lions might also have been exaggerated. After all, the Ugandan Railway Company only acknowledged the deaths of 28 Indian workers, but I think it's quite possible that the British weren't particularly great at record keeping, or for that matter, cared how many Africans and Indians died building their railway. I'm also sure they would have considered the whole man-eating affair thing to be quite embarrassing.
Do we wish the world to think that the builders of the British Empire are afraid to do their job because of a few minor difficulties with the local wildlife?
Nevertheless, scientists recently took hair samples from the stuffed man-eaters that are now on display at the Chicago Field Museum, and then they analysed their chemical composition to determine how many people they actually ate in the last 3 months of their lives. The research concluded that one lion ate 11 people and the other ate 24, thereby confirming some historian suspicions. However, this only proves how many people they ate and doesn't disprove Patterson's claims that these lions were mostly just killing for fun, which I think is more than a possibility. I mean, like, if you look at your common house cats, you can see how much pleasure it gets in killing mice that they never eat. All of these points are indeed quite plausible, but that's not what people have a hard time in believing. It's simply the alarming numbers that these lions killed, because nothing like this has ever happened before or since. We as human beings take great pride in our conquest over the natural world, but we also find the idea truly disturbing when nature fights back.
Now, I find it a little bit disturbing that the cave, Patterson's cave, was rediscovered the year after the movie The Ghost in the Darkness came out, and it had been lost for so long. Nevertheless, the pictures of the cave do look a little bit like Patterson's pictures. The bones, on the other hand, I'm told that the bones were taken to Nairobi, which is where they are now. It's also possible that the local people recollected them because, you see, this probably wasn't the man-eater's cave. Instead, the local Tata people have a custom of reburying their dead, and the skeletons are put in some sacred place. And it's entirely possible, indeed likely, that what Patterson discovered was not the lion's den, but rather a secondary burial site used by local folks.
If you want to see the lions today, you must go to America. They are at the Field Museum in Chicago, Illinois. Even now, if you dare lock eyes with them, you will be afraid.
The end of The Ghost in the Darkness doesn't really mark the end of the Patterson story. In fact, he stays with the British Army for a very long time. Remember, this is 1898, and he stayed all the way through World War I. In fact, in World War I, he was the commander of a Jewish brigade in the British Army, the first one that they'd ever founded. And the fact that he was that commander may very well have had an impact on his career because he was never promoted above lieutenant colonel. However, Netanyahu a few years ago did proclaim Patterson as the founder of the Israeli Defense Forces.